the Dem freakout. They're in full-blown freakout mode. Donors are keeping lists of, okay, Biden could lose. Biden. The problem is that it's because people keep asking me, do you think they're going to have a switcheroo? No, I don't. I don't think they're going to have a switcheroo because it's too late. Kamala Harris would be the only alternative that you could have in that scenario. When you got to Chicago, that would be it. And we've talked about this before. Let's let this play out for a moment. Let's go ahead, just explore it for a moment. Let's explore for a moment the possibility of switching out Joe Biden by the time they get to the DNC in Chicago, which is not going to happen. Like I said, this is not going to happen. But let's just imagine for a moment. So you would ignore, and think about how this would enrage the Democrats' base. You would ignore the choice that Democrats made for their primary candidate because they picked Biden. And then if they didn't go for Biden, if they decided to switch him out, they would have to go for Kamala Harris, right? Because then imagine if you had the 1-2 punch of ignoring the primary candidate that was picked by the majority of Democrat voters and then elevating somebody like Kamala Harris. But then if they didn't want to pick Kamala Harris because she would be as bad, she's a mess, then imagine the second punch of it's the first woman of color who was vice president who would be going to become president of the United States, and it would be viewed as them stopping her. So you have two gut punches right there back to back, especially if they were going to replace her with somebody like Gavin Newsom, which is literally their only viable candidate at this point. There is no way they're replacing Biden. The strength of Biden's candidacy is going to be built around the people that he surrounds himself with. He can't really rely on Kamala Harris very much. She doesn't bring a lot to the ticket except DEI. That's it. She protects him with criticisms of diversity because this is a guy who literally eulogized the former leader of the KKK 20 years ago. And not even 20 years ago, in a funeral. He gave his eulogy at his funeral. And has been pro segregation in the past, etc. So he needs that protection in their eyes. I just can't imagine Democrats being so dumb. They already did this with Hillary and Barack Obama, remember. There was a lot of questions. There were a lot of people who originally left the Democrat Party back in 2016 and even after 2008 and 2012, because Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Barack Obama in the primary, there were a lot of questions about the Democrats' primary in Texas and how really Hillary Clinton really won it, but it was given to Barack Obama because they had the superdelegate scheme. Remember, you have your delegates that have to be pledged, but then you have your super delegates that can just go anywhere. And Democrats used that. That's really the way that Barack Obama won the nomination. And so Democrats already really enraged their base once. I don't think that it would survive them doing it again. So it's a very difficult task. There's no way I see forward for them to switch him out. They had the opportunity to switch him out previously, and they didn't do it. He shouldn't have ran, but who else did they have? By the time 2020 was coming around, going into that, they needed Cuomo in New York still because he still needed to build his name. Cuomo was going to be the guy. He was going to be their next guy. But he really messed up with the nursing home thing and COVID, and that destroyed his chances. So he's out. Gavin Newsom was their plan B. Buttigieg was never a serious contender. Harris was never a serious contender. They don't really have anybody else. And their far left people aren't doing it. So they're in a kind of a pickle. They don't really have anybody else. So I don't think that they're going to have the switcheroo like has been so often advertised. You got Biden. You got Biden, that's it. But all the same, Democrats are still freaking out. Because he's the incumbent and his polling's bad. And it's not good news for Trump either, because Trump's polling should be better than what it is. You're going up against the worst guy who's ever been elected in office, and you're still statistically tied with him. And he's the incumbent, and he's tied. That's bad for him. But anybody should be ahead of him because his policies have been so bad. I mean, for crying out loud, his job approval rating is 38%. Barely. Barely. And Trump's lead, 538, says it's only a 0.3 lead. And that's not a lot. It's well within the margin of error. So there you go. Telling you, it's gonna be tricky. I think when he went into Brooklyn, some of the Republicans were saying, why is the GOP wasting time going into Brooklyn? I think the GOP needs to go into these cities that are hard blue, forever hard blue. Go into St. Louis, go into New York, go into Chicago. Abandoning those areas because you think that they're just going to keep voting blue is why they keep voting blue. I mean, their own elected leaders don't take the time to visit them or hold rallies in their area. Retail politics works. That is a truth that will remain unchanged for all of time. Retail politics works, and that kind of stuff works. That's the stuff that he needs to be doing more of. But Biden's thing, like the little presser today that they did with that was just stupid. That was so unnecessary and dumb. I don't even get the point of it. I don't know whose idea that was. In the meantime, where's Biden? It just goes, his camp, one of the reasons that Biden suffers so much is because you can tell that there are a million different cooks in that kitchen. There is not a cohesive tone. There is not a cohesive message. They're all over the place. You can tell that different groups are jockeying for power because Biden's definitely not making these calls. He's barely sentient. Now, this comes on the heels or right before the story from ABC, and I saw actually this morning, which is what I'm leading into. So the DNC, they're going to nominate Biden and Harris to bypass the Ohio ballot stuff. Remember, Democrats decided that they weren't going to follow the rules for their primaries, and so they ended up, because Ohio Democrats wanted to go so late, they're going to miss out on getting Biden on the ballot. And this was something that the Ohio Senate was looking at. The August 7th ballot certification deadline. So they're going to, the DNC is going to move to conduct these virtual party proceedings to certify them as the party nominees before the ballot deadline. And because they have their convention on August 19th. And, Democrats decided to play around, and they, when you end up changing your dates of this and that, there are rules and there are consequences, and that's what ended up happening. But, that's kind of wild. They're going to nominate him virtually. I think they're also doing this as protection for Biden. I think that they're moving to avoid any potential switches. And they're also, so it's not just Ohio, but that makes a convenient excuse, does it not? Ohio makes a very convenient excuse, but I think it's by and large they're doing it to avoid any kind of, because I'm not saying that I don't believe that there wouldn't be an attempt to do a switcheroo. I'm just saying that's what will happen if they do it. And so they're going to, that's a huge moment that is taken, though. When you have the official nomination for the candidate, and then you have the celebration, and they have the stuff that drops, from the ceiling and all that stuff. I mean, there is that moment, but I think they're willing to sacrifice that just to kind of protect their path. Interesting. So they're going to make that, so that way they'll bypass that omission there in Ohio. So it's a twofer. They're able to use that, I think, as a veneer